Thomas awakens in a climbing lift. With him are supply holders check WCKD. At the point when the lift arrives at the main, an entryway above him opens and he's encircled by a Master of the Flies type group of young fellows. Thomas takes off running, however stops when he understands he's in a little meadow encompassed by tremendous walls. Gally represses Thomas and holds him back from attempting to run into a labyrinth which is open through an entryway in the wall. The head of the gathering, Albie, and his advisor Newt clear up the circumstance for Thomas. When a month the lift, or the crate as they call it, rises to the top with provisions as well as another kid. They generally live in the knoll and call themselves gladers. Not a solitary one of them can recall that anything about their pasts or why they were sent there, yet following a couple of days their names return to them. Every kid is given an alternate work. Some are manufacturers, some are runners. An entryway opens in the monster wall consistently and shuts consistently. The entryway props a labyrinth that encompasses the knoll. Runners go through searching for an exit plan. In the event that you're caught in the labyrinth overnight, the mourners get you and you kick the bucket. The labyrinth changes consistently. Albie was the primary kid to show up in the meadow. Nobody realizes the reason why they're there. Thomas begins to frame a kinship with the youngster who came up the prior month. He's one of the most youthful of the gathering. He is Chuck. That evening there's a festival for Thomas. Gally is wrestling one of the other young men and inquires as to whether Thomas needs to have a go. They wind up competing and when Thomas hits his head on the ground, he recollects his name. That evening Thomas has a fantasy. It's brimming with brief pictures, yet a lady says, "Insidious is great." Albie takes Thomas around to show him a greater amount of the destinations. The young men cut their names on the wall when they show up. At the point when one bites the dust, they cross off the name. Thomas attempts to fit in and he's given the errand to go uncover manure from out in the forest. While he's there, he's gone after by Ben, one of the runners who was stung by a mourner. While they battle, the other kid says, "This is all your shortcoming. I saw you." That kid has what they call the evolving. A sting will clearly cause huge torment and make you inclined to savagery. There's no remedy for it, so they force the kid into the labyrinth around evening time similarly as the entryways are shutting. Everybody is worried that there was a mourner assault during the day. That evening Thomas has another fantasy. It's a greater amount of the woman guaranteeing him that Insidious is great. However, presently he likewise recalls himself and a young lady about a similar age sitting opposite one another at workstations going over diagnostics. The following day, Albie goes into the labyrinth to backtrack Ben's way to figure out what occurred. It downpours during the day. Presently time slipping away, Albie actually hasn't returned. All the young men accumulate around the entry to the labyrinth. Similarly, as the entryways are going to close, the lead runner named Minna shows up with an exceptionally harmed Albie. Thomas hurries into the labyrinth to help them, however the entryway closes behind him. Minna and Thomas use plants to suspend Albie's body in an attempt to guard it from the mourners. Albie was stung while inside the labyrinth. One of the mourners shows up and pursues Thomas. The mourner seems to be tremendous, kissing bugs with robot legs and scorpion tails. Thomas and the mourner go around a piece as the walls in the labyrinth change. At last Thomas can draw the mourner between two walls that are impacting and crush. The following day Gally requires a gathering of the gladers. Most are energized that Thomas killed a mourner. There's another gathering however, led by Gally, who feel that the standards they have were set up to keep everybody safe, and since Thomas showed up things have changed, like mourners going after during the day. Talking about things changing, the lift shows up. The young men head out to check what the lift brought. Inside are no provisions, just a little kid. She turns upward and says, "Thomas," prior to dropping. In her grasp is a note that peruses, "She's the last one ever." Gally calls for Thomas to be rebuffed on the grounds that non-runners are permitted in the labyrinth. He could do without the way that the young lady knew what Thomas' identity was. He's terrified that the lift hasn't returned down since they took out the young lady. Newt says Thomas can be secured for the time being with practically no food, and beginning tomorrow, he's a runner. Gally is distraught at his tolerance. A portion of the young men return into the labyrinth to take a gander at the remains of the mourner, which further surprises Gally. Inside it they find an odd gadget that has an electronic showcase perusing the number 7. The gadget additionally is stamped WCKD. The young men acknowledge whoever sends them supplies likewise made the mourners. Minnow shows Thomas a guide of the labyrinth. There are different external segments that open every day as the labyrinth changes. Each external segment is numbered. The previous evening, segment 7 was open. The young lady is awakened. She's at the highest point of a pinnacle, tossing stuff at the young men on the ground. Thomas shouts dependent upon her that it's him. She consents to allow him to come up. He makes sense of that her memory was cleaned, however in a couple of days she'll recollect her name. She says she as of now recalls her name. It's Teresa. That evening, Thomas manages his discipline of being secured. Chuck visits him and presents to him some food. He likewise requests that Thomas give his folks a little cut sculpture Chuck made. Despite the fact that he doesn't recollect his folks, he's certain his folks recall him and miss him. Thomas offers back the sculpture and lets Hurl know that he'll have the option to give that to his folks himself. The following morning Thomas and Minnow go into the labyrinth alongside the gadget they got from the mourner. The gadget winds up making clicking commotions and guides them to another part Minnow has never seen. Minnow is likewise worried that each of the external areas of the labyrinth appear to be open. They get to a wide region stamped WCKD shipping bay that winds up in an impasse, yet the gadget abandons red to green and opens another way. That way prompts what resembles some kind of sewer burrow. The edges of the passage have the very ooze that the mourners emit, so they return to the dale. Thomas chooses to utilize one of the needles on the as yet evolving Albie. It winds up improving him. At the point when he comes to, he tells Thomas, "You were their number one." Yet we don't figure out what he implies, since outside entryways all around the labyrinth start to open and outpour scores of mourners. The mourner assault that wipes out bunches of the young men and annihilates the majority of their town. Albie is among the dead. Throw is saved in the wake of being gotten by one of the mourners. They wind up chopping off its tail. After the assault, Thomas understands that the toxin from the mourner stings assists the casualty with recalling, so he takes the chopped off tail and stings himself, and he recollects somewhat more. Thomas recollects that the labyrinth isn't a jail, it's a test. He sees all of the other young men in brooding cylinders. A great deal of them are in a frenzy. He likewise considers himself to be a researcher alongside Teresa. The gladers utilize the subsequent needle and Thomas is restored and admits to everybody that he's one individual's liable for everybody being there. Gally is enraged. He and his gathering attach Thomas and Teresa to stakes outside the entry to the labyrinth as a contribution. However, a portion of the gathering is still with Thomas, so they free them. Presently the gladers are partitioned. Thomas lets Gally know that he'd prefer pass on attempting to escape than bite the dust in the dell not attempting. Thomas brings a gathering into the labyrinth. They get to the shipping bay region from previously and are gone after by mourners once more. They go through the sewer passage and it prompts a locked entryway. They need a mathematical code to overcome. They understand the code should be the succession in which the labyrinth would regularly open. Teresa types it in and everybody passes through an entryway. Walls pound every one of the mourners behind them. The children stroll through certain passages until they find an entryway checked exit. They go through and presently they're inside the lab from Thomas' dreams and recollections. Every one of the researchers are dead. A video begins to play. The lady from prior distinguishes herself as Ava Page, and lets the children know that they don't recollect this. However, there was worldwide demolition by something many refer to as the Flare. She was essential for a disputable gathering called the World Calamity Kill Zone Division, WCKD, that accepted that in testing the children they could screen their cerebrums and track down a fix. While she talks, behind her guerrilla officers rush in and begin killing different researchers. She lets them know she's happy they finished the principal assessment and advises them that wicked is good. Prior to closing down, Paige shoots herself in the head. An entryway opens driving outside. Before anybody can leave, Gally appears. He has a weapon. He says that they all have a place in the maze. He goes to shoot Thomas, yet Chuck bounces before the slug. Gally gets wounded in the chest with a blade. Hurl hands the, presently ridiculous, sculpture to Thomas and passes on. A gathering, who seems to be the guerrilla troopers from the video, rush in and takes the children outside to holding up helicopters. At first it seems as though they're in the desert, however we pull out to uncover that outside used to be a city. Structures are annihilated and everything is canvassed in sand. They fly over the labyrinth and the dale and nobody inquires as to why the helicopters simply didn't land inside the meadow and salvage the children there, all things considered. In the last shot, it is shown that Paige is alive and clearing counterfeit blood off her head. She says that the children have taken the lure. A greater number of children made do than she expected. The labyrinth was a triumph, and presently stage 2 can start as the helicopter takes off to the City of Remains. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notification and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching, see you in the next one.